Okay, so what is functional programming? If anybody has known, I guess everyone here is a web developer and must have worked in JavaScript, so they must known the functional programming. What is functional programming? Why we use in the functional JavaScript and how we use it. So I'll just telling the quickly summary of it, just to brush up your knowledge. And I know you all guys know very well. I'm also learning, you're also learning. So let's bother for me sometime, and we'll enjoy the session. Okay. So what is functional programming? It's a programming paradigm. Programming paradigm is there are multiple programming paradigms like imperative style, object-oriented programming as well, and here also functional programming as well. So imperative style, what exactly imperative style is? Uh, in imperative programming paradigm, we follow the some steps like do this and do that kind of stuff. Means line by line we iterate, line by line we execute the code. But in object-oriented programming paradigm, we use which we use in JavaScript, like we have the objects and we have methods and we change them like that. But in functional programming paradigm, where we use functions, means where the functions are the kings basically. So yeah, next functional programming's definition we can say it is a basically a coding style. It's just a way of styling your code, style of writing your programming. So means treating some values or functions in a different way that we used to treat them in object-oriented programming. So basically organizing your code and approach which it is come in functional programming. What exactly I can say another definition for functional programming is like it's a mindset, the way of thinking a problem, the way of approaching a problem or task. It comes under the functional programming as well. And the last one is it's a sexy trend and buzzword trending nowadays. Everybody is talking about the functional programming in the interviews, in the presentations, and everyone is going their best to explain what is functional programming. So functional programming is not something like technology or language related. It's independent than that. It's just a concept which we use in our daily programming. Okay. So why functional programming in JavaScript? So what is the necessary of functional programming in the JavaScript? We must have seen like object-oriented JS is tricky, like handling the prototype and inheritance. Many times our JS developers here means for sure many of us faces the problem with this keyword, just binding this to the wrong binding, and we scratch our heads. So what is happening if I bind something like this to this, and if I'm doing in a correct way, but my code is not correct, blah blah blah, something stuff happens in object oriented when we deal with object oriented JS. Same with the prototype inheritance. Anybody has heard as a beginner in JavaScript what is prototype inheritance? It's super confusing at the very start. Yeah. So that's why functional JavaScript comes into the picture. It helps us to write safer and easier code and to maintain and debug our code as well. So functional programming is easier, safer to debug and maintain our code at the very best. Also, it help us to maintain a good project as well. And we are having the established community for means a lot of JS developers are there who approaches the functional programming. They are developing the code, the library, and the packages. Lot of people who are expert in this help you to write the better code. So might here as well. Some people are here already know about it too. Please comment if you do. So yeah, so why functional JavaScript is part is taken, but okay, wait a second. How we got it means how we can implement the functional programming in our coding style. Yeah, exactly. That is my question. So there are few steps that we follow. It's like I said, is just a concept that we use to deliver a good code or write a good code into our daily practices. So there are few steps that we gonna take a look today. There are a lot and lot of things, but we can't cover it in a very short time. So I keep it very short and covering few steps that we can use it and which will very much helpful for us too. Okay. So let's go with first one. Do everything with functions. In functional programming means functions express everything in the program. Functions are basically like taking inputs and gives output. So majorly we are looking here is the flow of taking something as an input and gives as an output. Here, like I said in the previous slide, imperative programming style, like we are having here name Akash and another variable greeting. When I console log greeting plus name, I'm getting hi, I am Akash. So this is an imperative style example, which is not a function. In functional programming, we have functions basically. So we can write a function named greet, pass the parameter, and when you call the function, we get the output. So this is what the concept of functional programming is. This is one step of the concept. It's a very huge, but yeah. In functional programming, we do everything in functional way. Okay, so this is done. Next one is avoid side effects. So what are side effects? Side effects is something that might function do that isn't computing its output from the input which you are giving and returning the output. Okay, I know that that is totally confusing. It's okay. So I'll explain it again. So basically, uh, function is returning some output which is not dependent on the inputs which we are passing, but also on the external parameters. Let's take a quick example over here. So here we are passing, we are taking the score variable and we are using into a function add. So this score variable is basically dependent on the external parameters, some of the external parameters, global variables we can say. So why this is bad? This is not a correct way actually, but it's just because it's dependent on some global variable. If the global variable changes, we might not get the expected output from the function. Yeah. So the correct way is we directly pass the data to the function. On here, we are having the add function in which we are passing the score, and we are when we call the function, we'll get the output. So if means as my input is not dependent on any global variable, uh, this is what we are keeping our data and functions separated. So in which debugging is easy and code is maintained properly. And yeah, this is also a good example for the pure functions. So basically, so sorry. So basically, you want your functions to take input and do nothing extra, just compute and give output and return it. We don't need an extra external parameters to compute or manipulate in our functions. So in functional programming, we follow these steps, just like a simple step. And we more approach in functional programming is like for the pure functions. So this is the good example for the pure functions, which the inputs are not dependent on the external parameters, just whatever you're passing. Okay, I found here a glitch. I need to pass a parameter over here. My
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
sorry, last moment changes. But yeah, it's okay.
Mm, yeah.
Thank you, Akash. Okay, so next we can check out is use of higher order functions. So yeah, higher order functions many of us know. Let me quickly summarize this for you. Higher order functions which can be taking inputs as a function and output also returns the function as output. Sorry, my bad. What are higher order functions? Functions which takes functions as an input or functions which are returning other functions as the output. Okay. So here we're treating functions as object themselves. So calling functions and into functions is like, okay, yeah, this is a higher order functions. Let's take a quick example for this. So here we are having the add name in which we are passing the parameter name, and the another we are what we are returning here is another function which is again taking a parameter age. So what we are returning is the name age. Name is the name and my age is the age. So when I call this, I'll create something like new variable and call the add name Akash here. I'm sorry Akash, I'm using your name in all the examples, but it's
Yes.
and when I call the get info and passing the number age number, my output will be name is Akash and my age is 24. So this is the example for higher order functions, which is moreover used in functional programming. They actually say to use more higher order functions to implement the other in your code day-to-day life also. Also, there is a great example for higher order functions like array prototype.map functions, array dot filter functions. Yeah, instead of using for loops, if, do, whiles, we can use map, filter, and reduce as well, which are available for us for as a higher order function. Many other integrations are also avoided, and we can write the clean code. Okay, so this is another concept of functional programming. Use higher order functions, and okay, I guess yeah, we discovered just map functions and filter functions. Okay, and next is avoid mutation. So what is mutation? I guess we all know that. All of us are familiar with it. I'll just cover it up again. Mutation is like changing object and variables values. So avoid mutation in functional JavaScript. So what it basically mean? So immutable is once we set any variable or data, we can't change it. It's not going to change. So let's take a quick example over here. We are having the rooms array in which we are having rooms h1, h2, and h3, and we try to change the room for to the second position, that is for the h3, and we assign it for the another room h4. So in the rooms array, I am getting h1, h2, and h4. So this is kind of a bad in functional programming, but yeah, we can cover it up as a code as well. So yeah, no mutation. We are having rooms again, h1, h2, and h3. We allocate a new array, means a new variable, which is new rooms, and we use the map function over here. We iterate it, and once we found out the h3 room, we return as a h4, and at the end output, we are getting the two rooms. So my main rooms is immutable, and I'm also getting my new rooms array. So the point here is, we functional programming avoids, because this can cause us a lot of problems, because once my rooms array is changing, if I'm manipulating some rooms, I'm using this rooms array into my other code or other functions, and if the rooms array is changing, I might get into trouble, and that is very hard to debug as well if I'm doing the mutation type. But in the new mutation, new no mutation concept, we are basically creating a new array, and we are using this new array to manipulate the other functionality that we wanted to achieve. So here we are making rooms as a immutable, so I can get the new rooms and the original rooms too. So this is what we followed in functional programming to avoid a lot of bugs and headaches. Yes.
So we'll be talking about some of the features of ES6. So I'll be starting with destructuring. So many a times we have observed that we have to use multiple values that are taken out from a single array or an object. So far the syntax that we have been going with is, as we can see on the screen, that we take the index position of that particular array, or we use the key of the object to assign the value. Other than that, what we can use, which is a good approach now, is destructuring, so where we directly assign the name of the variables that we need, and we assign it directly to an array. So that way we can take out the values that we need from an array, and this way it looks much more cleaner. Along with that, on the right side, you can see that there is a same example, but by using a spread operator, that is triple dot syntax with the rest. So what happens with the longer array, that is A is assigned as 10, B is assigned as 20, and the rest gets assigned with the array of 30, 40, and 50. So this helps us with writing a much cleaner code. In a single line, we can complete all the assigning of the variables. Moving on, we have default parameters. So while declaring a function, yeah. While declaring a function, we have parameters that are needed to be included, and we do not uh, add the default values as of now, because that was not a concept previously. So for checking those particular values, we used to add an extra line, that if that particular parameter has been passed or not, we check undefined condition, we check the value types and everything, right? So to lessen out that particular line, so we can save like 2 or 3 lines of taking out the conditions and everything by using default parameters directly. So without the default parameters, it's a simple function where I'm trying multiplication. Okay, so if I do not multiply, like if I do not pass the second value, that is 5 comma 2, I have to check that if that particular value is undefined or it has been passed or not. And based on that, I would use 1 as a default value, right? So this adds up an extra line to my code. But with default parameters, I can keep it directly on while declaring the function. That way, I'd not have to write that particular extra line, and I get the same output as you can see the snippet itself. Right. Uh, Moving on. Now we'll discuss some of the data structures that are available in JavaScript. Basically, the main data structures would be map, set, weak map, and weak set. So we'll be starting with map right now. So map holds a key value pair, which is similar to that of an object. We can use any type for keys as well as for value. There is no restriction based on that. And it remembers the original insertion order of the keys. So that is one important point for map. Okay. We have following methods available that we use in map. So for creating a map, we have new map with parentheses. Map.set we use to store the new values. Map.get to get the value based on the key that has been passed. Map.has to check if that particular key exists or not. So this is a boolean return, true or false. Map.delete to remove the keys. Map.clear will clear everything part of that map object. And map.size will return a count of how many elements are present in that particular map. Next, we have set. Now, set is similar, but it stores unique values of the types. So it cannot have duplicate values inside of set. That is the main approach for using it. Again, we can use any of the types for creating the elements inside of a set. So here also we have few methods available. That would be new.set to create a new set. We have add here to add the values, and this would return the set itself. When we add a value, we get the complete set as a return of that. We have set.delete that removes a value. Sat.has to again a boolean return to check if the value exists or not. Set.clear to remove everything, and set.size to get the current element count out of the object. Now, two new ones are weak map and weak set. So basically, when with map and set, everything has been stored, so nothing is garbage collected because it has a strong reference to the keys it has stored. So with weak map and weak set, they are the same as map and set, but they are allowed to garbage collect because it weakly references to the key. So in case if that particular key is not in use, it will be garbage collected, so it won't be available after that. So with weak map, again, we have key value pairs available, but only objects can be used as keys. So we cannot use other primitive types as our keys with weak map. And the references are as weakly reference keys, so they will be garbage collected once they are out of use. Same goes for weak set. Again, the same behavior as set. So it is again unique, but the reference is weak. So it will be garbage collected when they are not in use. Okay. Next is promises. So promises were introduced to help us writing asynchronous functions. So with promises, there are basically three states, that is pending, fulfill, and rejected. When in pending, that means the promise function is hasn't been run yet, or it's in the motion, we can say. And with fulfill, that means it has been completed as was expected. And with rejected means the condition that was set inside the promise has not been met. Um, so we can check these conditions once this has been declared, a promise has been declared. While using it, we can check if it's been fulfilled or rejected by using dot then or dot catch. So in dot then, we'll get the fulfilled result of the promise, and we can run functions accordingly after that. And with dot catch, we can get the errors if anything has gone wrong while completing the promise. Other than that, lastly, there is dot finally, which helps us run a function that does not concern itself with if the promise has been fulfilled or rejected. It just has to run after the promise has been completed with whichever result. So for that particular reason, we use dot finally. So right now we're seeing chaining without promises. That means how we used to do it before. That is, inside of choose topping, we're keeping place order function. Inside that, we're keeping collect order function. Inside that, we have eat pizza. So this was not a very good approach to go, and it does not help other coders after you to read the function and to get the idea quickly. Another I would say bad approach was using set interval, which I've done, and again a bad approach, very bad approach. But yeah, with promises, we can use the dot then function. This looks much more cleaner and it's much easier to see if there is any errors or anything. It makes it much easier to catch it quickly and to debug. Um, Next, we'll be moving on to the array methods. Yeah. So here we'll be revisiting all the array methods that are available to us so far. I'm sure most of you already know all of these methods. Just consider this refreshment of that. Okay. So let's see. Firstly, we have a fruits array. Uh, uh, we are using a for each function to get the return of that particular array itself, and we only want to get the text of that particular entry and the indexes. So that's a simple approach. Other than that, we have push. Now push is used to enter a new value into the array at the end of the array. Then we have pop. Pop is used to remove the entry from the ending point. So the last entry has been removed of the array. Next we have shift. With shift we can remove the front, like the first entry of the array we can remove with shift. And with then we have unshift. Now unshift is used to add an entry into the first position of the array. Other than that, we have index of. Now index of, we pass the value that we think is part of the array, and then we get the index of that particular value inside the array. Other than that, we have splice. Now with splice, we can remove an item with the position that has been passed and how many items we want to remove. Um, and we have slice. Now slice, as we see, we can use to make a copy of the said array. Now this is a shallow copy. Shallow copy is it, it holds a reference to that particular array, so any changes would directly be affected again to the both arrays. Yeah. Then we have concat. So in concat, if we want to combine two particular arrays, we can use the concat function. Uh, so the syntax is like array1 dot concat array2. This way we can combine both the arrays together and we can use them. Next we have index of and includes. So index of tells us the value as we have discussed, okay, of the entry that is part of that array. Includes it will return just the boolean values, that is true or false, if it is part of an array. Another thing about index of is it returns -1 if that particular entry is not part of the array. Um, okay. Oh yeah. Remember index and includes right now because there's a question coming after this. Okay. Then we have the find function. So let's consider a new array that is users. That's an array of an objects. So we have ID and name inside of it. So when I use a find function, uh, I'm I'm using an arrow function here to get the to set the methods of the find. So the condition that I've set right now is user.id should be less than 3. So it will return the first and the second entries from that array. And that's how we check the length. So yeah, okay. Some more functions now. We have map function. So map return changes up the arrays and returns that one. So here we have like an array set with the strings of names. Uh, I've I've mutated that into text dot length. So I'm checking the length of those particular entries and I'm creating a new array out of it. Then we have reduce and reduce write. So with the reduce function, we have like a starting accumulator, then we have the current values. So we use the accumulator to add up everything or to reduce the complete array into a single entry based on that. So here we have a simple array with the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 entry uh, of it. And so in reduce, I'm passing the sum. Sum is my global value here. Current would be the single entries that are taken from that particular array, and you see comma 0 at the end. That syntax defines that sum, the initial value of the sum variable is 0. So when I complete this particular loop, the sum starts with 0 value that goes with plus one, current. So initially the current would be 1. So that always continues itself. So 0 plus 1, that is 1. Then it goes 1 plus 2. Then it sums becomes 3. Then it goes 3 plus 3. That is the current value now. Then it goes to 6. That is how the whole result is reduced to 15. So we get the addition out of it. Another function we have is reduce write. Reduce write starts the works the same way, but start the whole calculation from the right side of the array, not from the left side. So here the first value that is used would be 5. That is how it would be started, the current value, and the accumulator is again the same values. Uh, One other point here, the accumulator, if no value has been passed, like you see in reduce, right? In that case, the first value that is taken from the array goes to accumulator, and the current value starts from the next position. So in the reduce right function, the accumulator will be 5 at the start, and the current value would start from 4. This same functionality is therefore reduced as well. If I did not pass 0 there, the starting value of the sum would have been 1, and current would be from 2. That is how the loop would have gone. Then we have every and sum function. So again, a simple array with 0 to 6 values as a part of it. And we're checking if with dot every function, we are checking if the num value is greater than 5. So for this, it goes as false because we of course have 6 there. And with sum, when we use the sum function there, then it goes true because some of the values are greater than 5. So this is a great approach to use when we want a smaller syntax, or we know which values we want to check and go over. So this is a good approach for that purpose rather than using map and looping it all over itself. We are done. So here are the references for from where Shubham and I have completed all of this presentation. This PPT, of course, will be available to you guys, so you guys can go through these references if need be.